Gaming in 2026 is shaping up to be massive, with studios pushing new worlds, new tech, and some of the most ambitious ideas we've seen in years. From brutal action to atmospheric survival, from cinematic storytelling to pure chaos, this lineup is stacked with games that are already shaping the future of the industry. We've curated 35 of the most anticipated titles, handpicked for their innovation, scope, and potential to define the next era of interactive storytelling. If you're as excited as we are, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment with your most anticipated pick. Let's see who's counting down the days alongside you. From the very first look, Grand Theft Auto 6 presents itself not just as the next step in the franchise, but as a confident reimagining of what an open-world game can deliver. Vice City returns with a clear purpose, not simply as a nostalgic reference, but as a fully formed, reactive city full of energy and movement. The map is undeniably large, yet it's the density that stands out. Distinct neighborhoods, from polished beachfront districts and sun-bleached suburbs to humid wetlands and vibrant urban centers, each designed with a level of environmental detail and cultural nuance that feels genuinely lived in. The technical improvements are immediately noticeable. Vehicle handling shows more refined physics and responsiveness, striking a thoughtful balance between approachable driving and believable road feel. Combat looks sharper and more deliberate, and character animation hits a new high point for the series. Subtle body language, detailed facial animation, and context-sensitive NPC reactions help create a world that feels responsive rather than merely populated. What's especially interesting is how the game engages with contemporary American culture. Instead of relying solely on exaggerated parody, it reflects modern absurdity with a tone that's critical, witty, and surprisingly grounded. Social media, viral trends, and local eccentricities appear to play a meaningful role in shaping the world's identity, giving the narrative a sense of timeliness without losing Rockstar's signature edge. Overall, GTA 6 looks like it's aiming for a bigger, more dynamic version of what people already loved. Fast, messy, unpredictable, but with a level of detail that makes the chaos feel believable. If Rockstar pulls it off, this could easily be the next benchmark for open-world games. Marvel's Wolverine looks like a darker, more mature take on the superhero genre, with a focus on brutal, close-quarters combat and character-driven storytelling. The tone is gritty but stylish. Dimly lit bars, rainy streets, and quiet, tense moments that say a lot without spelling everything out. What stands out is the attitude. Wolverine isn't a clean-cut hero. He's rough, worn down, and constantly trying to control the rage that makes him who he is. You can feel that personality in the world design too. Places that look lived in, dangerous, and full of people who don't want to be saved. Even without tons of footage, it's clear this game is aiming for a grounded, emotional approach rather than flashy superhero spectacle. If it delivers on that mix of intensity, character depth, and raw style, Marvel's Wolverine could be one of the most unique superhero games in years. Chrono Odyssey stands out as an ambitious fantasy RPG built around fast, cinematic combat and a massive world full of danger and mystery. The first thing that grabs you is the scale. Wide-open environments, ancient ruins, dense forests, and epic creatures roaming across landscapes that look beautifully crafted and full of life. One of the most interesting aspects is time manipulation. It isn't just a gimmick. It influences how you fight, how you move, and how you survive. Being able to rewind a moment or change the flow of combat opens the door for strategy and creativity in a way most action RPGs don't attempt. The world itself feels rich and immersive. There's a sense of history behind everything, and the visuals push a realistic style that makes every location feel massive and lived in. Large enemies, dynamic weather, and chaotic battles create a constant feeling of adventure and danger. Chrono Odyssey looks like it's aiming for epic scale, challenging combat, and a world that encourages exploration and experimentation. If you're interested in big fantasy worlds with tactical action and impressive visuals, this is definitely one to keep an eye on. State of Decay 3 looks like it's aiming for a much darker and more immersive take on the zombie survival formula. The environments feel cold, harsh, and unpredictable, with wildlife and infected creatures blending into the world in a way that keeps you constantly alert. The core loop still revolves around scavenging, building a community, and making tough choices, but everything seems more polished and impactful this time. Characters look more expressive, and there's a stronger sense that every decision, who you recruit, what you spend resources on, when you take risks, can change the direction of your group's survival. What's especially interesting is how the world seems to react to your actions over time, creating long-term consequences instead of isolated events. If State of Decay 3 can pull off that mix of emotional storytelling and tense open-world survival, it could be the strongest entry in the series so far. Phantom Blade Zero looks like a stylish mix of fast action and dark fantasy, with combat that feels fluid and aggressive. The swordplay has the sharp, cinematic quality where every move flows into the next. Dashes, counters, and long combo chains that make fights look both intense and graceful. The world itself feels unique, with a mix of steampunk elements, mystical creatures, and gritty environments that give everything a slightly eerie, dreamlike vibe. Character designs stand out too. Lots of personality, lots of style, without feeling overly exaggerated. What's interesting is how the game balances spectacle with challenge. It looks flashy, but also technical enough that you can't just mash buttons. You actually need timing and awareness to survive. If you're into fast-paced action with style and personality, Phantom Blade Zero is definitely one to watch. The Witcher 4 looks like it's building a massive, detailed world that pushes beyond anything the series has done before. The environments feel rich and atmospheric. Endless forests, windswept plains, and old settlements that look like they've been lived in for generations. There's this sense of a world shaped by history, politics, and old magic, not just a backdrop for quests. What stands out is how varied the landscapes are. You go from quiet rural villages to ruined fortresses, dense woodland, and remote regions that look untamed and dangerous. Weather and lighting add a lot of personality too. Fog rolling in, storms forming on the horizon, and sunlit valleys that feel almost peaceful until you realize how isolated everything is. The world doesn't just look big, it feels meaningful. Roads, architecture, and even the layout of towns suggest different cultures and conflicts, like there are stories baked into every location. It gives the impression that exploration will be about discovering history, not just checking off icons on a map. If the final game delivers even half of the scale and world-building being hinted at, The Witcher 4 could offer one of the most immersive fantasy settings we've seen in years. Crimson Desert immediately impresses with its scale and ambition, presenting a vast open world filled with striking landscapes, dynamic weather, and a level of visual detail that pushes the boundaries of what an action RPG can look like. From harsh deserts to bustling towns and snowy mountain ranges, every environment feels handcrafted to tell a story before you even set foot in it. Combat is fast, physical, and brutal. You're not just swinging weapons, you're engaging in cinematic, weighty encounters that mix melee strikes, ranged attacks, grapples, and environmental interactions. Fights look unpredictable and chaotic in a very intentional way, capturing the intensity of real battle rather than a scripted routine. What sets Crimson Desert apart is its blend of gritty realism and high fantasy spectacle. One moment you're dealing with grounded human conflict, The next, you're facing enormous creatures or witnessing magical events that shift the tone completely. This balance of grounded storytelling and epic action could make the experience feel both personal and grand.
Overall, Crimson Desert looks like a bold attempt to merge open-world adventure, visceral combat, and strong narrative direction into one cohesive experience. If the final game delivers on even half of what it showcases, it has the potential to be one of the most impressive RPGs in recent memory.
Nioh Berlin 2087 looks like a slick, dystopian sci-fi world where technology and corruption are basically two sides of the same coin. The city feels dense and industrial, rain-soaked streets, neon-lit alleys, and massive corporate structures towering over everyone, giving the whole place a cold, oppressive vibe. What stands out is the mix of detective work and futurism. Instead of just blasting through enemies, you're gathering clues, interrogating people, and navigating a system where everyone is hiding something. It makes the world feel more interactive and alive, like every mission has its own small mystery. There's also this underlying theme of humanity versus artificial control, which fits perfectly with the setting. If Nioh Berlin 2087 can hit that balance of story, atmosphere, and grounded sci-fi world-building, it could be a really compelling experience for fans of slower, moodier sci-fi games. Valor Mortis looks like a brutal medieval action game where survival depends on smart timing and brutal close-quarters combat rather than flashy heroics. The environments are grim and war-torn. Muddy battlefields, burned-out villages, and lonely castles that feel like they've seen years of violence and exhaustion. What stands out is how grounded everything feels. Fights look messy and dangerous, not cinematic, and you get the sense that one bad decision can end things fast. There's no superhero fantasy here, just cold steel, broken armor, and the constant pressure to stay alive. The tone seems serious, but not depressing, with a focus on strategy, preparation, and adapting to whatever the world throws at you. If Valor Mortis can balance its combat intensity with atmospheric storytelling, it could be a solid choice for players who want medieval action without the fantasy fluff. High on Life 2 looks ready to double down on the weird, playful chaos that made the first game so memorable. Right away, you can see the same oddball humor and bizarre world design returning, but with more polish and personality. The environments feel even stranger this time. Colorful alien cities, twisted landscapes, and surreal spaces that look like they came straight out of a fever dream. The talking weapons are back, and they seem even more expressive, reacting to your choices and keeping you entertained while you fight. Combat itself appears smoother and faster, with new abilities, mobility options, and enemy types that push you to stay active rather than just aim and shoot. It still has that quirky energy, but there's clearly more depth underneath the jokes. The humor is still sharp and absurd, but it seems balanced with moments of genuine story progression and world building. Overall, High on Life 2 seems to embrace its identity, funny, odd, and entirely unpredictable, while polishing its gameplay and presentation. If you enjoyed the first game's mix of comedy, sci-fi nonsense, and chaotic shooting, this sequel looks like a more confident, more refined version of that same experience. Resident Evil 9 Requiem looks like it's doubling down on that eerie, slow-burn horror the series has been doing so well lately, but with a bigger focus on atmosphere and psychological tension. The environments feel isolated and bleak. Abandoned towns, empty forests, and decaying interiors that constantly make you feel watched. The enemy designs look unsettling in a more subtle way, leaning less on pure jump scares and more on weird, inhuman movements and disturbing silhouettes. Combat seems deliberate and tense, forcing you to manage ammo and stay calm rather than spraying bullets in panic. There's also a sense that the story is leaning into mystery and emotional weight, not just shock value.
If Capcom can balance horror, exploration, and meaningful storytelling, Requiem could end up being one of the most memorable entries in the series. DEFECT looks like a tense blend of sci-fi survival and psychological thriller, set in a facility where nothing works the way it should and every system feels like it's on the verge of breaking down. The environments are cold and sterile, tight corridors, flickering lights, and abandoned workstations that make the place feel unsettling even before anything happens.
What's interesting is how the game seems to focus on vulnerability rather than power. You're scavenging tools, solving problems, and trying to stay ahead of threats you don't fully understand, rather than running around with high-tech weapons. That uncertainty gives the world a constant edge.
The atmosphere leans more towards slow-building dread than jump scares, with a mystery you unravel piece by piece. If DEFECT can maintain that tension while rewarding smart decisions, it could be a great pick for players who like their sci-fi scary but thoughtful.
Displacement looks like one of those sci-fi games that grabs your attention by making you question what's real and what's not. You're dropped into a world that constantly shifts. Environments glitch, architecture bends, and familiar spaces twist into something uncanny. It creates this tense, uneasy feeling without relying on loud jump scares.
Gameplay seems focused on exploration and problem solving, with a mix of stealth and light combat. You're not a powerhouse here. You're trying to survive, adapt, and figure out why everything around you is collapsing in on itself. That vulnerability adds a lot to the atmosphere. What really stands out is the visual style. Clean, almost clinical environments clash with surreal, distorted moments that feel straight out of a psychological thriller. It's minimalist but impactful in a way that makes every scene memorable. If you enjoy sci-fi that's mysterious, unsettling, and more about tension than action, Displacement looks like a fascinating experience worth keeping an eye on. Permafrost drops you into a frozen city that's barely hanging on, where every building and street looks like it's been swallowed by winter. The world feels dangerous, not because of monsters or jump scares, but because the cold itself is always working against you. You're scavenging, crafting, and making choices that determine whether your group actually makes it through another night. What stands out is how lived-in everything looks. Abandoned apartments, makeshift shelters, and frozen vehicles that tell little stories about who came before. It's less about fast action and more about slowly rebuilding something in a place that's falling apart. If Permafrost can balance survival tension with meaningful exploration, it could be a really engaging experience for anyone who likes atmospheric worlds and tough, resource-driven gameplay. BLACKFROST, The Long Dark 2 looks like it's bringing back that harsh, lonely survival feeling, but on a much bigger and more unpredictable scale. The frozen landscapes feel even more dangerous this time. Blizzards, unstable terrain, and wildlife that blends into the environment until it's right on top of you. What stands out is how quiet and atmospheric everything is. You're scavenging for supplies, managing warmth and energy, and making tough calls with limited resources, all while knowing that help isn't coming. It's less about fighting the world and more about enduring it. There's also a stronger story presence, with hints of mystery and human conflict layered into the survival mechanics. If BLACKFROST builds on what made the first game so tense and immersive, it could deliver a survival experience that's both haunting and memorable. Jurassic Park looks like it's aiming for that perfect mix of wonder and danger, letting you explore lush, prehistoric environments while constantly reminding you that everything around you can eat you. The jungles, rivers, and open plains feel alive, with dinosaurs roaming freely instead of being locked behind scripted moments. What's cool is how unpredictable the world seems. You're managing resources, navigating terrain, and trying not to stumble into a T-Rex nest while you're just trying to get from point A to point B. It's less about being a superhero and more about surviving in a place where humans are definitely not at the top of the food chain.
If the game can balance exploration, tension, and those iconic wow moments, Jurassic Park could end up being a really fun return to a world that's equal parts beautiful and terrifying. Soulframe looks like a dark fantasy world built around nature, mysticism, and slow, deliberate exploration. The environments feel ancient and overgrown. Ruined temples, misty forests, and strange wildlife that looks beautiful but slightly unsettling. There's this constant sense that the world is alive and not really interested in helping you. What's interesting is how calm the tone feels. It's not loud or chaotic, it's more atmospheric, with quiet moments where you're just taking in the environment before stumbling into something weird or dangerous. The creatures and characters have a surreal, otherworldly look that makes the world feel mysterious rather than predictable. If Soulframe can deliver on that blend of exploration, mood, and surreal world building, it could end up being one of those games that sticks with you long after you stop playing. Ill looks like one of those horror games that just wants to ruin your sleep. The creatures are nasty in the best way possible, twisted, fleshy, moving all wrong, and reacting to every bullet with brutal physics that make combat feel intense and gross in a really satisfying way. The environments are dripping with atmosphere too. Dark, abandoned spaces, flooded rooms, creepy lighting. Everything feels like it's seconds away from something horrible jumping out. And the sound design just makes it worse, in a good way. Gameplay feels heavy and grounded. You're not some superhero blasting everything. You're just trying to survive, shaking, reloading, desperately trying to keep monsters back with whatever you've got. Ill is shaping up to be dark, violent, and seriously immersive. If you like horror that hits hard and doesn't hold back, this one is absolutely worth keeping an eye on. Tides of Annihilation looks like a dark fantasy world that's constantly shifting between beauty and danger. The environments are huge and dramatic. Ruined kingdoms, twisted forests, and ancient coastlines swallowed by storms and magic. It feels like a place where the world itself is collapsing, and you're just trying to make sense of what's left. What really stands out is the atmosphere. The lighting, weather, and environmental effects make everything feel unstable, like a disaster is always moments away. You see signs of old civilizations everywhere. Broken statues, flooded cities, and strange relics that hint at a history nobody fully understands. The tone is bleak, but not hopeless. You get the sense that exploring isn't just about survival. It's about uncovering what caused this destruction and whether anything can still be saved. If Tides of Annihilation can deliver on its world-building and sense of scale, it could be a standout for players who love exploring mysterious, ruined fantasy worlds. The Vernyhorn looks like a really creative blend of fantasy, adventure, and survival, set in a world full of strange creatures and handcrafted environments. The art style has this soft, storybook quality, but the world itself feels unpredictable, with landscapes that shift between peaceful exploration and sudden danger. Gameplay seems focused on gathering resources, crafting gear, and learning how different creatures behave rather than just fighting everything you see. There's a sense of discovery built into the systems, like the world wants you to experiment and figure things out instead of rushing through it. What stands out most is the tone. It's whimsical without being childish, and mysterious without being overly grim. If the Vernyhorn can balance exploration, survival, and its unique visual style, it could be a really refreshing take on the fantasy genre.
Nioh 3 appears positioned to refine and expand the core strengths of the series: fast, demanding combat, deep build customization, and a rich blend of history and supernatural folklore. The gameplay looks sharper and more deliberate, emphasizing precise timing, stamina management, and adaptive strategy rather than brute force. Enemy encounters seem varied and punishing, with yokai designs that are both visually striking and mechanically distinct, pushing players to read attacks and respond intelligently. The visual presentation is darker and more atmospheric, with environments that reflected Japan caught between myth and conflict. If Nioh 3 maintains this balance of technical combat, challenging progression, and thematic depth, it has the potential to stand as one of the most refined action RPG experiences in the genre. A new Onimusha entry would aim to re-establish the series' identity as a blend of fast-paced swordplay, supernatural tension, and historical drama. The combat appears focused on precise strikes, defensive timing, and resource management, creating a rhythm that rewards skillful execution rather than aggressive button inputs. Visual design leans heavily on atmospheric environments: dimly lit castles, mist-covered villages, and corrupted landscapes that evoke a sense of haunting beauty. Creature designs carry an unsettling blend of demonic and human traits, reinforcing the narrative's darker undertones. If the game successfully delivers tight combat, evocative world-building, and a coherent reinterpretation of classic themes, Onimusha could re-emerge as a compelling action title with both nostalgic appeal and modern relevance. Fatekeeper presents itself as a dark fantasy action RPG built around fast, skill-driven combat and a rich world shaped by myth and corruption. The atmosphere is immediately striking. Dense forests, ruined settlements, and ancient structures overtaken by monstrous forces, all rendered with impressive visual detail that reinforces the sense of threat and decay. Exploration seems to play a significant role. The environments are sprawling, layered, and filled with secrets, encouraging players to step off the direct path in search of lore, loot, or hidden challenges. Environmental storytelling appears strong, with locations revealing the history of the world through visuals rather than long exposition. There also seems to be an emphasis on player choice, whether through combat style, progression, or how you approach threats in the world. The tone is somber and dramatic, but grounded enough to make the stakes feel meaningful. If Fatekeeper delivers on its promise of atmospheric exploration, demanding combat, and rich world-building, it could be a standout experience for fans of dark fantasy action games that value skill, challenge, and immersion. Chronicles Medieval looks like a grounded take on the medieval era, focusing less on fantasy and more on the gritty reality of life back then. The world feels rugged, crowded markets, muddy roads, and worn-down villages surrounded by dense forests and dangerous borders. It has that lived-in look where every building and piece of armor feels handmade. What's interesting is how much the game seems to lean into survival and social dynamics instead of just constant combat. You're trading, managing resources, dealing with factions, and trying not to get crushed by the politics of the time. It gives the world a sense of tension even when you're not swinging a sword. If Chronicles Medieval can keep that balance of realism, strategy, and open-world exploration, it could be a great pick for players who want something more grounded than the usual medieval fantasy adventure. Mudang, Two Hearts looks like a really unique mix of Korean folklore and emotional storytelling, set in a world where spirits and humans are constantly crossing paths. The environments are colorful but slightly eerie: mountain temples, mist-covered villages, and dreamlike realms where reality feels flexible. What stands out is the tone. It's not just action and spectacle. It seems focused on relationships, choices, and the emotional cost of dealing with forces bigger than yourself.
The characters have a grounded, human feel, even when they're interacting with supernatural beings. There's also this sense of discovery built into the world, where exploring isn't just about finding loot, but uncovering traditions, secrets, and spiritual history. If Mudang, Two Hearts, can deliver on that balance of mythology, atmosphere, and personal storytelling, it could be something genuinely special. Breathedge 2 looks like it's doubling down on the weird, sarcastic sci-fi tone that made the first game memorable, but with a bigger world and more freedom to mess around. You're exploring space stations, alien environments, and debris fields that feel chaotic and unpredictable, with plenty of odd gadgets to experiment with. Survival is still at the core, but it seems less restrictive, more about crafting, exploring, and figuring out how to stay alive while everything around you tries to kill you in ridiculous ways. The humor is definitely still there, just delivered with a bit more confidence and polish. If Breathedge 2 can keep that mix of comedy, creativity, and light survival challenge, it could end up being one of those games that's fun not just to play, but to test how stupid you can get before the universe fights back. Reanimal is coming from Tarsier Studios, the team behind Little Nightmares, and you can immediately feel that same offbeat, unsettling charm in the world design. It's a survival game, but with a weird, playful twist. Mutated animals, odd environments, and a constant sense that something unexpected is just around the corner. Instead of going full horror, it leans into curiosity and experimentation. You're crafting tools, observing creature behavior, and figuring out how to survive without turning every encounter into a fight. The world has that familiar Tarsier vibe too. Colorful, eerie, and slightly disturbing in a way that pulls you in rather than pushes you away. If you liked the strange, imaginative world-building of Little Nightmares, but want something more open, interactive, and less oppressive, Reanimal looks like a really interesting evolution of that style. Zoopunk looks like a chaotic mix of creature evolution, sci-fi tech, and open-world survival, set in a world that feels both colorful and slightly unhinged. The environments are packed with strange ecosystems, quirky characters, and areas that shift between playful and downright hostile, giving you plenty to discover without feeling repetitive. What makes it interesting is how much freedom you seem to have in shaping your own creature. You're customizing abilities, traits, and appearance, which changes how you explore and interact with the world. It feels less like a standard action game and more like a weird living sandbox where experimentation is encouraged. The overall vibe is fun and creative rather than grim, with a tone that doesn't take itself too seriously, but still gives you real systems to dig into. If Zoopunk can balance its humor, progression, and world design, it could end up being one of those unique games that's just fun to get lost in. The Godslayer looks like one of those games that doesn't just throw you into a fantasy world, it drops you right into the fallout of a broken one. Everything feels heavy. Ruined temples, abandoned cities, and this constant sense that the power you're fighting isn't just dangerous, it's sacred and corrupted at the same time. The cool part is how personal the combat feels. It's not just big, flashy swings, there's weight, timing, and that feeling that every fight could go sideways if you get cocky. You're not just slaying monsters, you're dealing with the consequences of taking on beings people once worshipped. And underneath all the action, there's this thread of questioning, power, legacy, and what it actually means to challenge something divine. It's messy in the best way, mythology colliding with human doubt. If the story keeps that grounded, slightly tragic tone, the Godslayer could hit that sweet spot between epic fantasy and something a lot more personal. Ananta looks like pure chaos in the best way possible. It's basically GTA energy dropped into an anime world, and it just works.
You're running around a huge city packed with bright lights, weird characters, and tons of freedom to mess around however you want. One moment you're drifting through neon streets, the next you're throwing hands with enemies or pulling off some over-the-top anime ability like you're in a show. The whole thing has style. Big, expressive characters, flashy movement, and colorful visuals that make every chase and fight feel wild and animated. Cars feel fast, combat looks punchy, and the city actually feels alive, like it's reacting to your chaos instead of just being a backdrop.
Ananta isn't trying to be realistic. It's trying to be fun, stylish, and non-stop energy. If you've ever wanted the open-world freedom of GTA, but with anime personality and ridiculous over-the-top action, this looks like it's aiming straight for that hype.
Blackwood looks like an action game built around clean, stylish combat with a definite John Wick energy running through it. The fights are fast, close quarters, and tactical, with quick takedowns, weapon switches, and smooth choreography that make every encounter feel deliberate rather than messy.
The world has that sleek, underground criminal aesthetic too. Neon-lit bars, rainy streets, luxury interiors hiding dangerous people, and a constant sense that you're moving through a network of assassins who all know the rules. It doesn't feel gritty in a grim way, but more controlled and professional, like violence is just part of the job.
What makes it stand out is how fluid everything looks. Movement, gunplay, melee strikes, they flow into each other in a way that feels stylish without being flashy for the sake of it. You get the impression that success comes from reading situations quickly, not just spraying bullets. If Blackwood can deliver on that mix of sleek presentation, tactical action, and that unmistakable cool assassin vibe, it could end up scratching the itch for anyone who wants a John Wick-style power fantasy in game form.
Industria 2 looks like it's leaning even deeper into its surreal, alternate reality vibe, and it works really well. The environments have this cold, industrial atmosphere mixed with strange, dreamlike elements, making every location feel familiar but unsettling at the same time. It's the kind of world where you're constantly curious about what's around the next corner. Combat seems tighter and more deliberate compared to the first game. Guns have weight, enemies hit hard, and there's a stronger focus on positioning and resource management instead of just running and gunning. It gives the action a more tense survival feel. What stands out is how the game balances mystery with storytelling. You're uncovering pieces of the world, meeting characters who feel layered, and slowly putting together what happened without being spoon-fed answers. It's atmospheric, slow-burn sci-fi done with confidence. If you're into narrative-driven shooters with eerie vibes and thoughtful design, Industria 2 looks like a solid step forward, with more polish and personality than before. Frostrail looks like a survival adventure built around movement and exploration in a frozen, collapsing world. You're traveling across snow-covered landscapes, abandoned settlements, and icy valleys that constantly threaten to slow you down or trap you. The environment isn't just scenery, it's the main obstacle you're fighting against. There's a strong focus on scavenging, crafting, and staying warm, but it doesn't seem overly complex. Instead, it looks more about planning your route, managing limited supplies, and reacting when the weather suddenly turns against you. The world feels harsh, but not hopeless, like every journey could be dangerous, but also rewarding if you push through. If Frostrail can balance tense survival moments with meaningful exploration, it could be a great pick for players who enjoy atmospheric worlds where the environment itself becomes the story. 007 First Light looks like it's going straight for that sleek, stylish spy fantasy everyone wants. The moment you step into the world, you feel that classic Bond vibe. Expensive suits, neon-lit cities, and dangerous missions that somehow still make you look cool while everything around you explodes. It's cinematic, fast, and honestly just feels fun to watch in motion. Combat hits with a nice mix of stealth and action. You're slipping through security, taking out guards quietly, then suddenly flipping into high-speed gunfights with gadgets that feel straight out of a blockbuster.
It's not just shoot and move, it's smart, stylish chaos where every takedown feels clean and satisfying. The environments look gorgeous too. Rooftops with rain pouring down, high-tech labs lit with cold blue lights, exotic locations with huge wide shots. Everything feels like a scene designed to show off Bond's world. You're not just walking into missions, you're entering set pieces built to make you the star. And the gadgets? Man, they're awesome. Tiny explosives, hacking tools, scanners, all those fun toys that make you feel clever when you pull something off perfectly. It gives the gameplay that creative, improvisational vibe where you're always thinking, okay, how do I do this in the coolest way possible? 007 First Light just has that energy. Smooth, confident, dangerous, and stylish as hell. If you love spy action that mixes brains with chaos, this one feels like it's aiming to deliver big time. Rules of engagement. The Gray State looks like a tense mix of tactical combat and political thriller, set in a near-future world where society has basically fallen apart. The environments feel grounded. Riots in the streets, abandoned buildings, and heavily militarized zones that make every mission feel unpredictable and dangerous. What's interesting is how much emphasis there seems to be on planning rather than just running in guns blazing. You're managing a squad, choosing approaches, and reacting when things go sideways, which gives the gameplay a more realistic, high-stakes feel. The story appears to focus on factions, ideology, and the messy gray areas of conflict instead of simple good versus evil. That tone makes the world feel believable and a little uncomfortable in the best way. If Rules of Engagement delivers on that mix of strategy, tension, and grounded storytelling, it could end up being a standout for players who want something more thoughtful than a standard shooter. That wraps our deep dive into the 35 most anticipated games of 2026, a year that promises not just evolution, but revolution across genres, worlds, and playstyles. From intimate indie visions like Reanimal and Frostrail to sprawling epics like Crimson Desert and Grand Theft Auto, the future feels rich, varied, and fiercely compelling. Which title has you hitting Remind Me the hardest? Let us know in the comments. Debate, hype, or sleeper picks welcome. Don't forget to like this compilation if it fueled your anticipation. Subscribe for more curated previews and analysis, and hit the bell so you never miss a drop. Until next time, game on, dream forward.